The streets had long since become my home, a place where people barely noticed me, their eyes sliding past as if I were invisible. My stomach clenched with hunger, my fingers numb from the biting wind. I pulled my tattered hoodie tighter around my body, trying to block out the cold gnawing at my bones. That's when I saw it. A sleek, black leather wallet lying on the sidewalk. It was right outside an expensive restaurant, the kind where a single meal probably cost more than I had seen in months. My heart pounded. A wallet meant money, maybe enough to buy some real food, maybe even a night in a warm shelter. I glanced around. The street was busy, people rushing past without a care in the world. No one had noticed the wallet. I picked it up with trembling fingers, opening it just enough to see the thick stack of crisp $100 bills inside. I swallowed hard. This was enough to change my life. But then, my eyes caught the ID tucked inside. A name. A face. A man in his late 40s, sharp eyes, a powerful jawline. The name beneath it made my breath hitch. Samuel Grayson. The billionaire. The same man I had seen on magazine covers, the one who owned half the city. My heart pounded in my chest. This was his wallet. I had two choices. Keep the money and disappear for a while, or return it. For some reason, I found myself gripping the wallet tighter and standing up straighter. I made my decision. It took me nearly an hour to gather the courage to walk inside the upscale building where Samuel Grayson's company was headquartered. The security guard at the front eyed me like I was something he had scraped off his shoe. "You lost, kid," he sneered, looking me up and down with open disgust. I clenched my fists. "I need to see Mr. Grayson." "It's important," the guard chuckled. "And why would Mr. Grayson want to see you?" I gritted my teeth and pulled out the wallet. His smirk faded as his eyes widened. "I found this outside. It belongs to him." For a moment, he hesitated, then grabbed his radio. "Hey, we got a situation here." Minutes later, a tall, impeccably dressed man came striding toward me. His presence alone made the air feel heavier. Samuel Grayson. I expected him to snatch the wallet, maybe mutter a quick thanks before walking off. Instead, he studied me, his sharp blue eyes taking in my ragged clothes, my hollow cheeks. "You found this outside?" His voice was deep, measured. "Yes." I held it out, and he took it slowly, his fingers brushing against mine. He opened it, glanced inside, and then looked back at me, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. "You didn't take anything." It wasn't a question. I shook my head. "No." He exhaled sharply, then turned to the security guard. "Get her something to eat." My eyes widened. I didn't return it for a reward. His lips quirked in something close to amusement. "And yet, you deserve one." I thought that was the end of it, that I'd take whatever food they gave me and go back to surviving. But fate had other plans. The next day, a sleek black car pulled up beside me on the street. The tinted window rolled down, and I nearly choked. Samuel Grayson sat inside, looking at me with a curious expression. "Get in." I hesitated. "Why?" He smirked. "Because I have an offer for you." That's how I found myself in the back seat of a billionaire's car, gripping the seatbelt like my life depended on it. He studied me. "You're different." I frowned. "Different how?" "You could have stolen the money, but you didn't." He leaned back. "I don't believe in coincidences. You returned my wallet for a reason, and I think it's because you're meant for something more." I scoffed. "I'm just a homeless girl." "For now," he corrected, "but I can change that." I swallowed. "Why would you help me?" A shadow crossed his face. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing." That answer left me speechless. Samuel Grayson wasn't just offering me food or shelter. He was offering me a job. Not charity. A real opportunity. "I need someone I can trust," he said. "Someone with no connections, no agenda. You're smart, you're honest, and you're desperate enough to take a risk." I frowned. "Take a risk on what?" A slow smirk spread across his face. "How do you feel about secrets, kid?" My stomach flipped. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a job. It was something bigger. Something dangerous. And for the first time in my life, I had something to lose. Samuel Grayson leaned back in his seat, watching me with an expression that sent chills down my spine. I had spent my whole life being overlooked, ignored. Now, one of the most powerful men in the city was studying me like I was an unsolved mystery. I swallowed. What kind of risk are we talking about? A glimmer of amusement flickered in his eyes. Come with me, and you'll find out. That should have been my cue to walk away. Instead, I nodded. He smirked. Good choice. The car sped through the city, the skyline towering above us. Minutes later, we pulled up in front of a building so tall it made my stomach drop. Follow me, he said, stepping out. I hesitated, then forced my feet to move. Inside, the lobby was pure glass and marble, filled with people in expensive suits. They barely glanced at me, though a few wrinkled their noses. I wasn't supposed to be here. But Samuel didn't care. He led me through a sleek hallway and into an office that looked like something out of a movie, floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive mahogany desk, and walls lined with books and paintings that probably cost more than an entire neighborhood. He gestured for me to sit. I perched on the edge of the chair, nerves twisting in my stomach. I have a problem, he said, sitting across from me. And I think you might be the solution. I frowned. What kind of problem? He slid a file across the desk. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos, grainy security footage, blurred images of men in dark suits exchanging briefcases, a ledger with names and numbers scribbled in red ink. A chill ran down my spine. What is this? A test, he said. Tell me what you see. I frowned, scanning the images again. Patterns. Connections. It wasn't just random people. It was a network. A system. And then I saw it. I pointed at a name in the ledger. This name appears 3 times in different locations. It's the same person, but they're using different IDs. I glanced up at him. Someone's laundering money through your company. His eyes darkened. Go on. I flipped through the papers, my mind racing. These aren't separate transactions. They're connected. Whoever this is, they're careful. They're routing the money through different accounts, but it all leads back to one source. I pointed at a final number. Here. I looked up to find Samuel Grayson staring at me like I had just grown wings. A slow smile spread across his face. Interesting. I shifted in my seat. What does this have to do with me? His gaze sharpened. I need someone with your instincts. Someone who can see things others miss. I shook my head. I don't know anything about business. You don't need to, he said. You see patterns. That's more valuable than any degree. My heart pounded. Why would you trust me? He leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Because you had every reason to steal from me. And you didn't. I exhaled shakily. I want you to work for me, he continued. Not as an employee. As an asset. The weight of his words settled over me. This wasn't just a job. This was something else. Something dangerous. Something life-changing. And, against all logic, I said, okay. His smirk returned. Then let's get to work. The days that followed were a blur. Samuel threw me into a world I didn't understand. A world of power, secrets, and money that moved faster than I could keep up. I had no official title, no office, no credentials. But he gave me access to files, numbers, and data that most people in his company would never see. And the more I looked, the more I realized something terrifying. Someone inside his company was trying to destroy him. At first, it was just discrepancies, small things that could have been mistakes. Then I started noticing patterns. Fake invoices. Unaccounted transactions. Whispers of something much bigger. One night, Samuel called me into his office. His jaw was tight, his usual confidence laced with something colder. You found something, he said. I hesitated. I think someone's siphoning money. A lot of it. His eyes darkened. Who? I swallowed. I don't know yet. But it's someone close. Silence stretched between us. Then, he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Then we find out who. A shiver ran down my spine. I wasn't just working for him anymore. I was stepping into something dangerous. And I had no idea if I'd survive it. We spent weeks tracking the leaks. I buried myself in files, searching for the one thread that would unravel the whole thing. Then one night, I found it. A single email. It was buried deep, disguised as a routine transaction. But the name attached to it made my blood run cold. It wasn't an outsider. It was someone in his inner circle. Someone he trusted. Samuel stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. I nodded. Positive. For the first time, I saw something dark flicker in his eyes. Then it's time to set a trap. The night Samuel confronted his traitor, the entire atmosphere shifted. We were in his private suite, where no one else could hear. The man I had exposed sat across from him, sweat beading on his forehead. "You have one chance to explain," Samuel said, his voice like steel. The man swallowed hard. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I cut in, surprising even myself. His eyes flicked to me, and in that moment, I saw something that made my stomach turn.
Fear.
He wasn't afraid of Samuel. He was afraid of whoever he had been working for. Samuel noticed it too. His lips curled into something cold. "You weren't working alone." The man paled. The room felt suffocating. For the first time, I realized just how deep this went. And I wasn't sure we were ready for what came next. The days after the confrontation were tense. Samuel tightened security. He made calls. And for the first time, I saw cracks in his usual confidence. Whoever was behind this wasn't just some corporate thief. They were powerful, dangerous, and they knew I was involved. I woke up one night to a text message from an unknown number. "You should have stayed in the streets." Ice filled my veins.
Someone was watching me.
Someone wanted me gone. And I had no idea how far they'd go to make sure I disappeared. Fear crept into my bones as I stared at the text message. My hands trembled as I held the phone, rereading the words over and over. "You should have stayed in the streets." I wasn't just some homeless girl anymore. I had stepped into something far bigger than I ever imagined, and now, someone wanted me gone. I rushed to Samuel's office the next morning, my pulse pounding. I burst through the doors, gasping for breath. His sharp eyes flicked up from his desk. "What's wrong?" Wordlessly, I handed him the phone. He read the text, his jaw tightening. Then, without a word, he reached for his own phone and dialed a number. "Find out where this came from," he said coldly. I swallowed hard. "Samuel, what if they're serious?" He leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto mine. "They are. But so am I." His voice was firm, unshaken. But I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something rare.
Concern.
I was no longer just some girl he helped. I was part of this now. And that made me a target. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made my heart race. Every shadow seemed to stretch closer. And then, just past midnight, I heard it. A faint scuffing sound outside my door. I bolted upright, my breath caught in my throat. My tiny apartment was silent, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Someone was there. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking as I texted Samuel. "Someone's outside." Seconds later, my phone vibrated. "I'm on my way. Don't move." My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Then, the doorknob rattled. I clamped a hand over my mouth, forcing myself to stay silent. A shadow moved under the crack of my door. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, it disappeared. Moments later, a knock made me nearly jump out of my skin. But this one was different. 3 sharp taps. "Samuel." I yanked open the door, my breath still uneven. He was there, 2 of his security guards flanking him. He took one look at my face, and his expression turned to steel. "Pack your things," he ordered. "You're coming with me." I never imagined I'd end up living in a billionaire's penthouse, but that's exactly what happened. Samuel wasn't taking chances. "Until I figure out who's after you," he said, "you're staying where I can keep you safe." I should have been relieved, but all I felt was trapped. Whoever was behind this wasn't backing down. And now they knew I was important to Samuel. That made me more dangerous to them. And it also meant they wouldn't stop until I was gone. The next morning, Samuel gathered his top security team. "This ends now," he said, his voice cold. "Find out who's behind this." One of the men hesitated. "Sir, there's something else." Samuel's jaw tightened. "What?" The man slid a folder across the table. Samuel opened it, and his expression turned to stone. I leaned over to look. My stomach twisted. Inside were surveillance photos.
Of me.
Someone had been watching me for weeks. Samuel slammed the folder shut. Double security. No one gets near her. But deep down, I knew the truth. I couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, I had to fight back. I wasn't going to sit around waiting to be hunted. If they wanted to come after me, I'd give them a reason to regret it. Samuel and I devised a plan. We leaked false information, something valuable enough to bait whoever was after us. And then we waited. For days, nothing happened. But then, on the fifth night, a message came through on Samuel's private line. "We know what you're doing." Samuel's eyes gleamed.
Good.
That means it's working. But I wasn't so sure. Because if they knew what we were doing, that meant they were closer than we thought. It happened so fast, I barely had time to react. One moment, I was inside Samuel's office. The next, the windows shattered as a deafening explosion rocked the building. The force threw me backward. My ears rang. Smoke filled the air. Security rushed in, guns drawn. Samuel pulled me up, his grip tight. "We're leaving. Now." Panic clawed at my throat. They tried to kill us. His jaw was like granite, and they failed. But something in his eyes told me one thing. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Samuel worked fast. Within hours, his team traced the attack back to one name. When he showed it to me, my blood ran cold. I recognized it. It wasn't just some faceless enemy. It was someone from Samuel's own company. A man he trusted. I stared at the name. "What do we do now?" Samuel's eyes darkened. "We end this." Samuel arranged a meeting, one the traitor never saw coming. When the man walked into the boardroom, he didn't even realize I was there. Samuel sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. The man smirked. "You wanted to see me, boss?" Samuel didn't speak. He just turned the laptop toward him. On the screen, footage of him orchestrating the attack. The man's smirk vanished. Samuel leaned forward. "Tell me why I shouldn't destroy you." For the first time, I saw fear in the man's eyes. He opened his mouth. And that's when the real truth came out. The traitor wasn't acting alone. He was just a puppet. The real mastermind? Someone even more powerful. Someone Samuel never expected. When we finally uncovered the name, Samuel went deathly silent. Then he looked at me and said something that made my blood freeze. "This isn't about business." I frowned. "Then what is it?" He exhaled sharply. "It's personal." The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The real enemy was still out there. Watching. Waiting. And we were running out of time. But one thing was certain. I wasn't just some homeless girl anymore. I was in the fight now. And I was going to win. Samuel's words echoed in my head. "It's personal." I sat across from him, my pulse hammering. "What do you mean?" His jaw tightened. "The person behind this, it's not just about money. It's about me." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Who?" I whispered. Samuel exhaled, his fingers curling into fists. "My brother." I froze. "Your brother?" He nodded, his expression grim. "Jonathan Grayson. He's always been ambitious, but now, he wants to take everything from me." My stomach twisted. This wasn't just corporate betrayal. This was family. And that made it so much worse. Jonathan Grayson wasn't just another businessman. He was ruthless. Cunning. And he had nothing to lose. The next day, a package arrived at Samuel's penthouse. No return address. Inside was a single note. "You should have stayed out of this." Attached was a photo. Of me. Samuel clenched his fists. "He's targeting you now." My breath hitched. This wasn't just about Samuel anymore. Jonathan wanted me gone. And that meant I had to end this first. We didn't wait for Jonathan to make another move. Samuel and I dug into his finances, his connections, his weaknesses. And we found something. A hidden offshore account. Millions in illegal transactions. If we exposed him, he'd lose everything. The only problem? He knew we were onto him. Jonathan invited Samuel to a private meeting. A warehouse. Midnight. I didn't trust it. Neither did Samuel. But we went anyway. The moment we stepped inside, I knew it was a trap. Men surrounded us, their eyes cold.
Armed.
Jonathan stood in the center, smiling like a wolf. Well, he drawled. Looks like the homeless girl has grown some claws. I stood tall. And you're just a scared little boy trying to be a king. His smile vanished. Samuel stepped forward. It's over, Jonathan. Jonathan chuckled darkly. No, brother. It's just beginning. Then he snapped his fingers. And the lights went out. The moment the lights cut out, chaos erupted.
Gunfire. Shouting.
The smell of burning metal. I dropped to the ground, heart hammering. I couldn't see Samuel. I couldn't see anything. But I could hear. Footsteps rushing toward me. I rolled just as someone grabbed me. A rough voice snarled, "You should have stayed in the gutter." I swung hard, my elbow connecting with his jaw. He stumbled back. I didn't wait. I ran. And then, the lights flickered back on. And I saw Samuel, bleeding. Jonathan stood over him, a gun aimed at his chest. Samuel coughed, blood staining his shirt. Jonathan smirked. Looks like I win. My hands shook. I could run. I could leave.
Or
I could fight. I grabbed a metal pipe from the ground and swung with everything I had. It cracked against Jonathan's hand. The gun clattered to the ground. Samuel moved fast, tackling his brother to the floor. For a moment, they struggled. Then Samuel came out on top. He held Jonathan down, breathing hard. Jonathan smirked. Go ahead.
Kill me.
Samuel's fists tightened. And for a moment, I thought he might. But then he let go. You're not worth it, Samuel spat. Police sirens wailed in the distance. It was over. Jonathan was finished. Jonathan was arrested. His empire crumbled overnight. Samuel reclaimed his company, his power, his life. And me? I had a choice to make. Samuel stood in front of me one morning, a contract in his hands. A job, he said. A real one. No secrets. No danger. I stared at the papers, my heart pounding. Then I smiled. I'm in. Months passed. I wasn't a homeless girl anymore. I had an office, a salary, a future. But more than that, I had power. I had a place in this world. And for the first time in my life, I was finally free. One day, Samuel called me into his office. I have something for you, he said, sliding a key across the desk. I frowned. What's this? A home, he said simply. I stared at him, stunned. Tears burned my eyes. Samuel, He held up a hand. You earned it. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I stood outside my new apartment, staring at the key in my hand. Once I had nothing. Now I had everything I never thought I'd have. And it all started with a single moment, a billionaire's wallet, and the choice I made. A choice that changed my life. And as I stepped inside my new home, I smiled. Because this was only the beginning.